템, 도소리.
Okay, we are now live on Facebook.
So, welcome. Welcome, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Okay,
welcome
we are now live on Facebook.
Good, welcome to this, the third in this webinar series, which is organized by the International Association for Spiritual Care. My name is Emmanuel Lartey, and it's my honor to serve on the executive of the International Association for Spiritual Care, an association that aims at fostering interreligious, intercultural, and international exchange in the fields of research and practice of spiritual care. We are grateful for the opportunity to participate in these webinar series. Next week, the webinar will have a panel of people from the religious tradition of Buddhism who will be addressing the issue of spiritual care in the light of COVID-19 from the perspective of their particular religious tradition. Today, we are addressing the same topic, what is spiritual care in the light of COVID-19 from Christian perspectives. And it's my privilege to introduce the speakers for this morning's or this day's seminar. And after I have introduced, I'll introduce all three of them, and then they will proceed immediately following in the order in which I introduced them. Our first presenter will be Dr. Esther Mombo, who is a lecturer and director of international partnerships and alumni relations at St. Paul University in Limuru, Kenya. She teaches and supervises students in the Faculty of Theology, in History and Theology. She's a member of the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians and involved in mentorship of young theologians. And it's been my honor and privilege to work with her in the areas of religion and health. Our second speaker is Dr. Daniel Schipani. Daniel was born and raised in Argentina and holds a Doctor of Psychology from Universidad Católica Argentina and a PhD from Princeton Theological Seminary. Daniel is Professor Emeritus of Pastoral Care and Counseling at the Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary. He's also Affiliate Professor of Spiritual Care at McCormick Theological Seminary and San Francisco Theological Seminary. He's a lecturer in Latin America and Europe, and author and editor of over 25 books on pastoral and practical theology. And our third speaker is Dr. Angella Son, who is Professor of Psychology and Religion at Drew University. Angella is a past president of the Society for Pastoral Theology, and she has served on the executive committee of the American Association for Pastoral Counselors, Eastern Region, and the Status of Racial and Ethnic Minorities in the Profession Committee of the AAR, American Academy of Religion. Angella also directs the Korean Pastoral Care and Counseling Program at Blanton Peele Institute in New York. She has numerous publications, including the book Spirituality of Joy, Moving Beyond Dread and Duties. She serves on editorial boards for several scholarly jury journals, including the Journal of Pastoral Theology and Pastoral Psychology. So I'm delighted to, at this point, invite Dr. Esther Mombo, who will be our first panelist.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, and thank you so much, Emmanuel and the group, for inviting me to be part of this webinar. I'm going to speak from my notes, so I don't have a screen to share, and it is a joy to really participate. I attended the last week's one and I learned a lot, and I'm sure that even today I'll be able to learn a great deal. What is spiritual care in the light of COVID-19? From a Christian perspective, but I'll locate it in a personal story and in the book of Lamentation. In the context of COVID-19, we see a lot of things that people write around. For example, the churches are locked down, but God is not. God is in control. All things work together for good. Trust in God, and many more. A few months ago, I lost my mother. She had been sick with dementia for a number of years, but it is not dementia that killed her. She fell, broke a bone, and she did not survive the operation. The morning she died, all her children surrounded her and spoke to her, each one of us giving her a form of affirmation and telling her how we love her. I was the last one to speak, and I said to her, "Mom, we love you, and you have had a long journey, and rest." After speaking, before I finished, she breathed her last. We all looked at each other with shock, but with a sigh of relief that she had rested from her pain. When the news went out, we were surrounded by family and friends during the days of planning for a funeral. Asked by a friend how I coped, I said I coped because I had a time to lament. I had a time to grieve and mourn her. A colleague lost her mother not long ago, and the funeral was done very fast, and only a few people attended. And sharing notes, I felt that I was allowed to lament, and that's why I was feeling better. She was still angry, feeling that her mother was not given a proper funeral because of the hurriedness in which it was done, since it was in the period of COVID-19. COVID-19 has presented to us many challenges across all strata of society. The COVID experience is discussed in different ways, in funerals, in economics, in politics, everywhere. People discuss or reflect upon COVID-19. While it is a difficult time, one of the difficulties is the reality of death, which is all over, and that is the anxiety that everybody is dealing with. It is time of death, as it were. What does it mean to die alone without family or friends surrounding you? We know that the quality of life, health, and well-being is just as important as the end of life. During this time, spiritual care is vital in the case of having a holistic life. One needs to be cared for spiritually. So the relationship between that which is not spiritual and that which is spiritual has a strong impact on people's ways of dealing with attitudes or emotions. In the period of COVID-19, there's a lot of anxiety about the disease itself, but anxiety in terms of the way we deal with those rights that are very important for us, those rights that form part and parcel of our healthy living. So spiritual care, which has to deal with the provision of compassion and empathy during these difficult times, is very important. So in this short time, I wish to discuss aspects of spiritual care in the context of COVID-19 from an African context and from my own country, because Africa is large. I speak from a Christian tradition, and I want to say that Africa houses all the Christian traditions that are in the world. Africa is one whose Christianity is vibrant, whose Christianity is full of life in terms of the way people pray, in terms of the way people read God's word, and in terms of the way people worship. Prayer is important, such that in my own country, Kenya, sometimes public events are started by prayer. Any community gathering will have that aspect of prayer. Whether you are beginning a journey or you have finished a journey, there is prayer. Bible reading and preaching is also very significant in times of worship. Praise and worship are also important segments of worship life. With COVID-19, the churches were closed. Measures to mitigate the pandemic included physical distancing and the reduction of public gathering. As a result, common worship, prayer, preaching, sacraments could not take place in gatherings. So the rites of baptism, confirmation, weddings, and most importantly, funerals could not be carried out. And in a context where funerals are very important, they are big, and people travel from far and wide to give their relatives a good send-off. In the villages, church gatherings is a center for social events, for gathering news, for teaching, and even for getting supplies. In my country, as soon as the first case was noted, as soon as the Ministry of Health said that we have a first case of COVID-19, churches were closed down. People could not go out to worship. And this brought a shock to everybody because churches were centers of spiritual life. So the questions around spiritual care were daunting. What will happen if we do not go to worship? The leadership of the church has been going through a sense of guilt. It's like we have abandoned our congregants. We haven't buried their dead. We haven't baptized their children. We have not been able to accompany them during the times of grief. So the sense of loss is a strong aspect in the community. The questions that have arisen is how and why and for how long are we going to struggle with COVID-19? We cannot gather, we cannot mourn our dead as families. We are in a society that is now haunted with many issues over and above the health perspectives of COVID-19. There is an increase, as we see today in the society, of isolation, sadness, loneliness, depression, helplessness across the society. We see the high cases of gender-based violence and many more. And we see pastors feeling imprisoned, that they are not able to accompany their congregants. In this regard, therefore, I look at an aspect of lament and hope as a form of spiritual care, and it is drawn from the Christian tradition. Because God is not ignorant of the sufferings of the people of God's creation. God has not forgotten us or rejected us. So how do we survive this pandemic? How do we offer spiritual care in this context? I say it is through lament and hope. Among Christians, one hears more voices of lament and hope during this period of the pandemic. Lament and hope are deeply rooted in the Christian tradition and drawn from the Bible, which is the center of Christian teaching. The practice of lament is a biblical practice. When we look at the Psalms, in part or in full, they offer a cry of lament to God. And in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, we disease of failed crop. Many of the Psalms come out. So in the Christian tradition, sad pain, heartache, and griefs to God for us. To lament are raw questions or unpolished prayers. Lament is a place where Christians bring all the emotions to God, even if it does not look pretty or polite. God does not always provide the answers we want in the case of lament. But as we lament, we share in God's own lamenting over the brokenness of creation. And as we draw near to the safety of God's love and receive God's compassionate embrace, we encounter afresh God's restorative heart for the whole world. It is Emmanuel in his book, Lament, who makes a strong case for the notion that lament is more than a feeling. It is a practice that uses and transforms suffering into hope. On hope, he says, it is not a consolation, but an anguished discipline of turning to and around God. So spiritual care in COVID-19 is spiritual care in isolation. COVID-19 has brought to light many challenges, as I said earlier, physically, mentally, socially, and spiritually. When churches are closed, people often feel or are feeling more distanced from God. When we look at Lamentations, we discover that there's a strong aspect of isolation even among the people of Lamentations' time. In this book, we read how deserted lies the city, once so full of people. The roads to Zion mourn, for no one comes to her appointed festivals. All her gateways are desolate. Similarly, our worship spaces are deserted. So how do we offer spiritual nurture, spiritual care when gatherings for worship are not there? We discover that spiritual care is not necessarily dependent on a pastor or a priest or other religious person. Some aspects of care are about attending to our own well-being and connecting with God in small things and big things. So physical distancing that is now happening, or that is one of the ways to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, offers opportunities for renewal, resuscitation, growth, and development spiritually. Praying the Psalms, for instance, offer a language to talk honestly and candidly with God. Meditation and reading and reflecting on God's word. For some, in our context, it means connecting through an e-church with friends, colleagues, and family. Spiritual care here then means we reframe our understanding of community and seek for alternatives for staying connected and maintaining community during this time. Spiritual care at the same time means taking care of the needs that are physical for others. COVID-19 has exposed the disparities within our countries and across our continents. It has been said by many that before COVID-19 kills us, hunger would have killed us. Hunger here is a representation of the challenges that many in the church and outside society are facing. We are faced with many, many challenges. How do we offer spiritual care? In Lamentations, we also read, "My eyes fail from weeping. I'm in torment within my heart because children and infants faint in the streets and in the city. They say to their mothers, 'Where is bread?' And they faint like the wounded in the streets of the city as their lives ebb away. Because of thirst, the infants' tongues stick to the roof of their mouth. The children beg for bread, but no one gives it to them." COVID-19 challenges us in the ways of offering spiritual care, that is, to the total person, not just to the soul. Spiritual care is the base on which we build the wholeness of life. In spiritual care, we are affirming that life is a gift from God that we have the privilege to share, protect, celebrate with, and for all in the community. This care is inclusive of physical, mental, and spiritual needs, or it is for the total person. Spiritual care means providing for and producing theologies that are affirming rather than theologies that are destructive. It is moving away from interpretations of COVID-19 as a curse or COVID-19 as a sign of the end times. Spiritual care is to listen to the lament and the difficult questions of those that are struggling. Why God? How long, God? When we look at the book of Lamentations, we find that the last questions of the book is, why do you always forget us? Why do you forsake us so long? Restore us to yourself, God, that we may be restored. Unless you have utterly rejected us and are angry with us beyond measure. So pain or calamity in the text of the Bible is sometimes interpreted as punishment from God. The people in Lamentation are aware of that, and they speak about that in their suffering. There are interpretations about COVID-19, even today, being a punishment for sin. But what COVID-19 has exposed are structural sins in our society. And it is those who are poor, for instance, who bear the brunt of these sins. The sins include human greed, inequity, depletion, exploitation, confusion, rage, hate, and lack. These are reflected in our communities in different ways, including fear, anxiety, and suspicion of the other. Worse still, the common thing that we see across nations in COVID-19 is an increase in domestic violence as people are forced to share the private space for a longer period. COVID-19 has eliminated the public space. In this context, the why question is very strong and important. When people who are suffering ask why, they may not need our answers as Christians, because sometimes our answers may not be adequate. Perhaps we may use the language of patience, the language of perseverance, but that answer is inadequate to them. They may not be seeking an answer or an explanation. They are expressing their agony and pain. It is therefore a mistake to think that we always need to supply an answer as part of our spiritual care. Often we do not know the answer, and the best we can do is to keep quiet and listen, and begin to interrogate ourselves if we are part of the problem, and then become part of the answer. Spiritual care means here listening and being available to listen. In Lamentations, as I conclude, we do not hear God speak. God is silent, and maybe there is power in silence, and Lamentation forces us to embrace this uncertainty or this silence. How long? Oh God, why? God. This is where, when we think of this book especially, we realize that God is there even though God is silent. So Lamentation creates a space for our uncertainties. Nothing, even uncertainty, is outside God. Finally, spiritual care, therefore, for me, is lament and hope. Going back to the book of Katongo,
We seem, yes, we seem to have lost the very end of Esther's presentation.
but an anguished Sorry, I will conclude now. Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Okay, I was saying that I conclude with the cry of Jesus. The cry. Okay.
Yes, please do that. Yeah.
I just conclude now. Sorry. Technology. The cry of Jesus about why, my God, why have you left me? Which is a radical expression of loneliness and hopelessness. And COVID-19 has brought to light a sense of loneliness and hopelessness. So how do we care for people in this context? It is, of course, to provide hope, but we are not providing escapist hope. It is a hope it is a hope of ensuring that we listen to the people's lament. The cry of Jesus and the cries of many today is a reminder that the issues in our society expect us to bring hope. It is a world that is hopeless, especially within the COVID-19 and everything that it has exposed. But for us as Christians, using the Christian text is to bring hope to this hopelessness. It's a defiance against those things that bring darkness. I said earlier that I felt I grieved better because I was allowed to lament. And I think for us as Christians is to give room for lament. And COVID-19 has provided us that space for lament, and lament is a defiance. Lament is a way of hope, the way of bringing us back to God. So COVID-19 is a moment of crisis and confronts us and pushes us to rethink ways of spiritual care in a different way. May the God of hope fill us with all joy and peace as we trust in him, so that we may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, Sister Esther. Invite Daniel Schipani to present.
Thank you, Emmanuel, and good afternoon and good evening to all of you, dear colleagues. I'm grateful for the opportunity to participate in this webinar series. Has been wonderful so far, listening to, reflecting with colleagues of other faith traditions and our own. And thank you for the invitation now to share a few thoughts from a Christian tradition. I'll try to stick to the 15-minute time allocated by using the PowerPoint here. So the objectives of the presentation are to underscore the challenges and opportunities we are facing in light of that pandemic, highlight some ways to respond in terms of resources of the tradition, and to encourage further conversation on and active collaboration in spiritual care in light of COVID-19 within and among our religious tradition. I don't claim to represent all of Latin America, but I'm involved in several countries there, so I'll seek to also give some glimpses of things that are happening there that might be helpful for all of us to consider. So the first thing I want to remind us, friends, is that the very word pandemic is an interesting word. It doesn't have originally a negative connotation, as you certainly know. It simply means of all the people or related to all the people. So one can make the theological claim and the faith confession that in the Abrahamic or Ibrahimic tradition of the promise and the call, I will bless you so that you will be a blessing, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. It doesn't get more pandemic than that. Our religious faith traditions have this opportunity, this, shall I say, mandate to be pipelines. That's a word that Rabbi Michael Springer used last week, actually, very helpful metaphor, pipelines of divine love and grace and healing. Caregiving in these times within and beyond the faith communities takes two main forms. One, I wish to highlight that the ongoing participation in the life of our Christian faith communities, what I would call the implicit curriculum. There is spiritual care going on. And second, as programmatic or targeted caregiving practices. So in this simple chart, a normative view of the church's faith community, the outreach in worship, the love of God, the love of others, and the love for ourselves in community, we might say that this is the ecclesial enactment of the great commandment, the great commandment, the love of God and the love of others, neighbors far and near, and self-love. And I go a little faster in order to save time. Participation in the life of faith communities has been, of course, affected enormously during these pandemic times. However, for example, in worship or celebration, what is happening and can happen is that there is a music, there is a possibility of somehow join from a distance in the singing in many instances, homilies that guide, bring comfort, consolation, praying, communal lament, as we were just hearing from Esther Mombo, the sense of being part of God's people, even if one cannot gather in person, testimonies that can be sort of included. In terms of community life, prayer groups are happening in many places in Latin America and in North America that I'm familiar with. The use of the cell phone in visitation, checking on one another. There seems to be, in some cases, more time than usual to do those things. And outreach activity, financially, whenever possible. My own home congregation in Argentina, for example, offers food several times a week, and hundreds of people from the city, the town, and other faith communities also. At home, in my own home, we're making masks, and women of our congregation are knitting already dozens and dozens of, for example, prayer shawls that I send to hospitals that people, women and others, can enjoy even if they are in isolation. Now, pastoral and spiritual care in the congregation can also be planned and must be planned and carried out, shall we say, programmatically, intentional and deliberate activities. Again, for those in the community and for those outside, I call this the explicit curriculum. In other words, what we say we are doing, what we are intentional, deliberately planning and carrying out with specific components. And I want to dwell a bit in the following chart that can be used to assess and to think about, to visualize manifold expressions of caregiving ministry in terms of both growth, assistance, growth as well as assistance and recovery. And I'm using the terms loosely here in nurturing, guiding, discerning, supporting, liberating, empowering ways, restoring, reconciling, healing, that we have been in our field in pastoral theology using to indicate ways in which pastoral care is offered. So here, friends, is the chart. Faith communities, churches in this case, as caring communities during COVID-19. And I find it useful to indicate and to think in terms of the psychiatric categories of primary prevention before illness happens, we might say, before trauma and the crisis. And then secondary prevention that alludes to timely attention to the onset of the crisis such. And then tertiary alludes to recovery, right? And I'm sure we are all familiar with those terms. Now, what I offered in consulting with folks in Latin America, particularly and elsewhere, is that this is a way to visualize in our particular time. For example, in quadrant number 1, within the faith community, what are we teaching? What have we been teaching about God and evil? Theodicy is so important. In my tradition, we imagine God as a self-limiting God, especially when it comes to power and justice. That's why we lament precisely, we protest, we resist, because God is powerless to stop the virus, for example, and to take care of injustice. So, and yet, the compassion, the mercy are always there. And then also what do we think about evil? Not something God created, but something that is. It's real, it's powerful, more powerful than we are. And yet there is the hope that eventually it will be overcome. And it's overcome to a certain extent, of course, when there is healing, there is care, etc., etc. So theologically appropriate preaching and teaching are essential, both within the faith, as in terms of what we call primary prevention, but also secondary prevention. For example, what kind of homily can be helpful from a spiritual care perspective at a time of a funeral? And again, virtual funerals are happening, and it's possible to have them. And there are, again, occasions in which consolation, the best sense of the term, is offered and support. Now notice in the quadrant number 2, prayer, virtual prayer and support groups. For example, during hospitalization, again, the wonderful devices that allow us to communicate electronically, even using the images, the faces. We can see the faces of the person, and they can see us visiting them from afar. To say nothing of the possibilities in the midst of the isolation, for example, to, shall I dare say, to transform isolation into a blessed time of solitude. It's like dreaming with the impossible, but it is possible, actually. And again, in 3 and 4, possibilities of collaboration with governmental and private efforts, advocacy regarding both prevention, the most vulnerable population, but also then in number 4, volunteering in our home congregation here in the United States. For example, we have a strong connection with the local, one of the local public schools, and we are in contact with them precisely this very time in our own neighborhood. And finally, friends, in this other chart, see the lament psalms that Esther Mombo alluded to so well and helpfully. We have the pattern from the seeming orientation to the disorientation, the abnormal times that traumatic situation like the onslaught of the COVID-19 and the sickness and conflicts that happens, death, etc., towards reorientation. And the lament psalms actually have a structure that is analogous to the very pattern of going from the seemingly normal lives to the disorientation, dislocation, disorganization, sometimes traumatic, towards a new normal. And what you have then, and everybody can see that later and at your leisure, modes of care focus on primary, secondary, and possible caregivers within our own faith communities. So I finish with the same prayer that we heard before from Esther. May we be faithful and may we be competent companions of the divine and with others in these times of suffering, with hope and much peace, but especially love, therapeutic love.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. We now invite Angella to make her presentation.
Oh, she's not, she should.
Please unmute, yes, Angella. Mm-hmm. Good.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Greetings, everyone. I would like to express my gratitude to the International Association for Spiritual Care for holding a very timely reflection and conversation from diverse religious traditions about spiritual care in the midst of COVID-19, and for inviting me to present a Christian perspective along with two esteemed scholars, Dr. Esther Mombo and Dr. Daniel Schipani. A lot can be said about the COVID-19 pandemic and spiritual care in the midst of it. I'm going to focus here on a major phenomenon intensified by the pandemic. I will discuss how the pandemic aggravates the level of narcissistic rage among people and how, or various ways, narcissistic rage manifests in our lives. Offer ways for building resilience through spirituality of joy as a main focus of spiritual care. And finally, suggest some theological implications. In doing so, my attention to spiritual care will address a wider concern with a specific focus on narcissistic rage, instead of paying attention to spiritual care of those who experience specific vulnerabilities and losses. The fact that the COVID-19 pandemic has raised the overall level of anxiety in individuals and in society as a whole is an indisputable truth. A critical rise in the level of anxiety in individuals and society is caused by uncertainty about our safety and fear of unknown harms and threats. Anxiety is one that is easy to identify as a major manifestation of the pandemic. I, however, suggest that another major manifestation of the pandemic is what Heinz Kohut calls narcissistic rage, which is less easily recognized, but can cause much harm to individual and societal well-being and relationships among people. Narcissistic rage, according to Kohut, results from the self's inability to control or navigate its own narcissistic needs or needs of the self. When the narcissistic need is not met, the self feels a lack of control and responds in rage. This lack of control, according to Kohat, is similar to the lack of control that an adult may feel when he loses control over different parts of his body, such as the ability to move her arms, bend her knees, open and close her mouth, etc. I'm unable to move to the next slide. So I'm going to stop share and come back. For more detailed discussion on narcissistic rage, you can refer to my article, Making a Great Man Moses, Sustenance and Augmentation of the Self Through God as Self-Object. Due to COVID-19, a heightened increase in the lack of control over our lives is very evident as individuals encounter losses that are personal and economic. They may be coping with the loss of their loved ones to COVID-19, or with the stress of being unable to be with loved ones while they are sick or dying in nursing homes or hospitals, and then being unable to hold a fully meaningful funeral to say goodbyes to loved ones after their death. Many are also unable to run businesses as usual, facing a reduction in business income, job loss, salary and benefit cuts, and a lack of mobility. People are often unable to enjoy typical aspects of life that reduce stress, like taking a vacation, and may face a reduction in social activities, a reduction in face-to-face or in-person gatherings, such as religious rituals and activities, and have to deal with the lack of available safety items, such as medical masks, disposable gloves, sanitizers, and so forth. They may be stuck in situations where they are being abused, having to be around abusive parents or partners all the time. To combat this lack of control in their lives, people express narcissistic rage in various ways. I will address 4 specific ones. First, the denial of COVID-19 is what some Americans choose to deal with the pandemic. For instance, some young people in Alabama or maybe still are throwing COVID-19 parties, an alarming competition in which the first to be infected with coronavirus is awarded with a payout. The party explicitly encouraged people who are already infected with the virus to attend the party. While they seem to acknowledge the virus, their actions in fact deny its virulent impact on people's health, lifestyle, and life itself. In addition, some people think that coronavirus is a hoax. For instance, during rallies for state governments to reopen their states, people had signs which read, "COVID is a lie." Some others do not think safety measures to protect themselves from contracting the virus are necessary and engage in social activities without the safety measures, putting them and others at risk. Second, people may turn to relentless thoughts and or actions to right a wrong or to hurt, damage, or even demolish persons or non-persons perceived as the cause of the hurt. This is evident in the United States in how some people identify Asians or Asian Americans to blame for the virus, direct their attitude of hate, and in some cases, commit hate crimes against them. For instance, hate crimes against Asians and Asian Americans include the FBI report claimed a hate crime in which, quote, 3 Asian American family members, including a 2-year-old and 6-year-old, were stabbed at a wholesale grocery store in Midland, Texas. The suspect indicated that he stabbed the family because he thought the family was Chinese and infecting people with the coronavirus. Another example, a witness reported that an Asian woman wearing a mask was kicked and punched at a New York City subway station. And another witness heard the woman being called a, quote, diseased B word. CBS San Francisco reported on June 5th, 2020, that more than 800 anti-Asian American hate incidents related to COVID-19 were reported across in California over the 3 months between March and June, according to advocacy groups that compile the data. The incidents include the physical attacks, verbal assaults, workplace discrimination, and online harassment. The manifestation of narcissistic rage waged against Asians and Asian Americans as the target group today is consistent in other pandemics in history. During the 2nd century in Asia Minor, Christians were blamed and persecuted, taking the blunt of rage directed at them as a cause of the Antonine Plague, which, quote, was probably one of the most disastrous outbreaks in antiquity. On the other hand, Christians massacred the Jews in Europe during the Black Death. Africa and Africans and gays and lesbians were picked as the cursed people who caused AIDS to spread. Sometimes a pandemic was created in the form of war to eliminate a target group, such as the massacre of Jews by Nazis and Japan's quest to conquer Asia and the world to eliminate contaminated influence from the Western world during World War II. More recently, some leadership in the United States tried to turn Muslims and Mexicans into the enemies of the US. On a macro examination, these extreme manifestations of narcissistic rage are evident. On a micro scrutiny, not everyone succumbs to this heightened level of narcissistic rage. Less malicious manifestations of narcissistic rage, however, are ample when we observe our own lives and the lives of others. We observe individuals who may not show the extreme level, nonetheless, explode more frequently in rage at one another because what they experience is helplessness from losing their sense of control in their lives. The third manifestation of narcissistic rage is comprised of a wide range of mild to harsh expressions of rage, including these eruptions of rage. Mild manifestations of rage include our thoughts or words which would not harm anyone, such as, how can a president of a country be so stupid? Righteous indignation belongs in this category that can prompt justice actions. The Black Lives Matter movement is a good illustration of rage expressed in righteous indignation. Harsh manifestation of rage, however, involves abuse of self and or others. Lastly, silent but deadly rage is denial. And as a result, ironically, lack of expression of rage is the manifestation. This lack of expression of rage is imposed on the powerless by those with power. Societal epistemology defined by those with power will oppress the powerless to ignore any harm or hurt done to them and disregard their rage as an erroneous response. This process of oppression is not a conscious experience, but it is so ingrained in the natural flow of lifestyle and structure that oppression often escapes any notice from either the oppressor or the oppressed. Good illustrations are a long-lived slavery of Blacks in the United States and mistreatment of American Indians today. During COVID-19, this oppression of the powerless is made more conspicuous because while COVID-19 does not discriminate, the degree of exacerbation differs depending on each one's current situation and context. For instance, COVID-19 exposes racial ethnic minorities make up a higher percentage of essential workers and are at higher risk of contracting the virus. Inequities in healthcare, economics, social structure, education system, housing access, and so forth, are exposed more sharply by the pandemic. Regrettably, many of us are concerned more about our own needs during the pandemic that is safeguarded and deeply buried in the United States. This power dynamic also exists in personal relationships. I'm deeply saddened every time I think about children who used to be able to avoid their abusive parents as much as they could by spending time at school, churches, community centers, neighborhoods, and so forth, who live in constant fear of harm by the ones who should love and protect them. It is only because they and their abusive parents are spending most of, if not all of, the time at home. This last type of rage is silent but deadly. It is deadly because bearing one's rage can poison his or her physical body, psychological health, and spiritual vitality. Buried rage will chew off one's humanity so that he or she will inadvertently lose one's very core of existence, that is, their dignity and rights as God's child, and their relationality with God and others. Spiritual care during COVID-19 thus must address narcissistic rage in order to assist people to be less affected by loss of control in their lives and prevent various rage manifestations that can deteriorate individual and societal health and well-being. I propose that spirituality of joy can play a crucial role in alleviating narcissistic rage and shoring up the level of resilience in people during the pandemic. Spirituality of joy encourages people to find joys, or in spite of joys, in their lives and the lives of others around them during the pandemic, and encourages them to focus on connecting with joys sprinkled by God all around us in spite of the pandemic. In order to encourage people to practice a spirituality of joy and find joys inside and out, I suggest that spiritual care emphasize 4 things: receive, flow, discover, and collaborate. Because of the time, I will be brief. Receive. Instead of trying to blame anyone or any group, receive the virus as a guest who has come to live with us for some time. Flow. Don't try too hard to make it on your own. Lower or even suspend your expectations. Wait and do not be ambitious and try to set new goals or find new opportunities. That is, working on family relationships, since your children are with you. Your grown children are living with you now. Wait for things to be worked on that are naturally revealed by the situation. Search actively for humors. Discover. Give time to yourself in finding and defining yourself. Find the creativity in you that can fuel your passion and vision. Watch for any hobby that might naturally develop in the situation. Collaborate. Find ways to collaborate to reach those who are at more risk due to pandemic.
That's good.
So for spirituality, you can go to my book. I will now briefly point out theological implications. First, COVID-19 reveals and reminds us that God is God of the world. And God's world should embrace the fluidity of physical boundaries. Instead of excluding other countries and thinking of each one's own country, it is time to collaborate as people of God. Second, we need to hear what God is telling us in the world, especially about severe disparity and in severe disparity in equity among people. Third, I suggest Leviticus 19:9 and 10, or 23:22, or Deuteronomy 24:19 through 22, as one of the most relevant words from God for us today in the midst of COVID-19. When you reap the harvest of your hand, you shall not reap to the very edges of your field, or gather the gleaning of your harvest. You shall not strip your vineyard bare, or gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the alien. I'm the Lord your God. Fourth, God is in pain with us. For the hurt of my poor people, I'm hurt. I mourn, and dismay has taken hold of me, as Jeremiah witnesses. Lastly, let God speak to and restore people. That is, reality of God should be made ever more vivid now. And please go to my article on how the scripture can come alive. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. What a rich range of offerings this day. We are going to move into our breakout groups for 15 minutes. Please, if you want to make a note of any questions or any comments that your group wants to make, please do so. And then on return, you may type those into the chat and we will respond and invite the panelists to respond.
Okay, I'm going to be activating the breakout rooms now. Just a reminder to our panelists to leave those breakout rooms so that people have a chance to talk amongst themselves. And then we will be back all together in 15 minutes. They should be popping off now.
So, well, thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much. It's, yes, thank you. Thank you. Wow, what a rich set of contributions. Wow. You know, lament, hope, joy. Really, really, really.
We hit all the ground.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, very, very, very.
Dan, you have to unmute yourself for some reason. I can't unmute you. I don't know why.
All right. No, I wanted to make sure that I didn't interfere with Angela's presentation.
Yeah, nope. I'm controlling all the mutes from here too. So yeah, it was brilliant. And I loved the way that everybody brought their own diverse context into the way you thought about it. I loved that Angela brought in a little psychoanalysis there, but the variety, and yet you could tell everybody was, in an umbrella way, a Christian speaker. Mm-hmm. I think this was, it's interesting too, in terms of the different traditions and where the focus is. This was the most overtly theological presentation of the speakers as a whole.
Yeah.
Without having to ask, and what are the theological implications? It was, all of you integrated theology just really beautifully.
Yes, I really, I was truly inspired by both of Esther's and Dan's presentations. You know, certainly we have different spin on our presentation, and so it's just so rich to hear other people on the same topic.
And there, I think there's also, I enjoyed a lot this session, both of your presentations, and it seems to me that the three of us implicitly and also explicitly actually reject some, unfortunately, widespread views about God that punishes and or also teaches the pedagogy of the trauma. I mean, my goodness. Now, unfortunately, there are grounds in the sacred writings about punishment and so forth, but we really highlighted something completely different, and so in that sense, I thought there was a theological commonality. It seemed to me in that sense, yeah.
It's also interesting that across, but in different ways, we were bringing to the fore the fact that COVID, the challenges of COVID in terms of even not naming it, whether it was relationships or whether it was violence, whether it was wealth, but it just, even without making it very explicit, it was there. That COVID has exposed it again. I don't think it's not COVID that has brought it, but it has just exposed it. I did like the things that Daniel said in terms of the meetings. I was saying we need to recreate different ways of being community, and then Daniel just showed them the different ways of being community.
Yeah,
but also very. I would want to read some of the articles that you put to the fore. The anger, how do we deal with the anger? And in this private space, because I was saying that the public space has diminished because we are all coming, but you are saying it is the rage with which we can't deal with the rage of sharing. We can't share. So very, very interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I will come back to you with the articles, but also to finish with joy. Wonderful.
Angela's thing.
yes, Pam knows it well.
I also thought it was good that you were able to show that, I mean, and this is Kohat too, right? That not all narcissistic phenomena are pathological or bad, that
Right.
you know,
That's right.
there's a channeling of narcissistic rage in a constructive way into righteous indignation, and it was a great way of bringing in the outrage we all feel right now, I think.
Kind of a sublimation.
Yeah, I'm not into sublimating.
And I try to be, I try not to be overt, but, I had my frustration and anger out with one or two statements.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Only two.
Yeah.
Here in, I've been sheltering since March in our home right outside Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And on July 4th, we had an invasion of these extreme right-wing militias. They're self-appointed people to protect their freedom, they're anti-COVID, they're like your COVID deniers, Angela, but they also show up at things with machine guns.
Oh my gosh.
Which unfortunately is legal in Pennsylvania, but they came to a protest 2 weeks ago in fatigues with machine guns, and it was pretty disconcerting. The protests we had this past weekend, they weren't there, thankfully. There were other things going on, but and you can see also the blending of narcissistic rage between righteous indignation, but also people bring their personal history with them, right? And so if you've got people who've been traumatized, that rage does sometimes spill over into other things and irrational behaviors, even on the right side of things,
that's right
side of things.
Oh, that's right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And they are totally joyless, incidentally.
Oh, yeah.
It's a very interesting thing. No, and they can't.
That's an excellent point.
No, I mean, where is the joy? This is not unlike what happens with strong fundamentalist religiosity. I mean, where is the joy? So, Angela, your contributions on this are really...
It's interesting you say that, Dan, because I was at a vigil and then a march that was outside the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York. And it was, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people. It was because it was framed with lament, in fact. There was a service on the steps of the cathedral, framed in lament and prayer. And then we marched to Adam Clayton Powell Square in Harlem with some stops at important places along the way, like the Frederick Douglass statue and so forth. And people were commenting who were around me that there was a spirit of joy and of almost like a festival spirit of being together in this moment, even though we were protesting something really evil.
Yeah.
That I have not felt at some other protests where it's just grim, you know, and everybody's just angry.
Exactly. The joy makes the celebration life-giving, we might say, and community nurturing, as opposed to the divisiveness and the lies and you know, all the rest. It's interesting in the New Testament imagery, the evil manifestations in terms of lying, accusing, dividing, misleading. Oh boy, my goodness. Speaking of a spirituality of evil, it's just, and
that is the significant thing, that instead of looking at this evil from within, these structural aspects, to try and bring it a theology of saying that COVID-19 is as a result of your sin among the people that are really struggling to live, and you tell them that you have sinned. That's why there is no. Not trying to help them to see sin in a wider context, sin in terms of greed, in terms of whatever. It's one of those theologies that here we are battling with, that you don't just make people to fast and pray because of their sins, but widen. Which sins are we talking about? Let's look at the wider society. Let's look at the inequities, the inequalities, rather than just inward sin. And you have people who are just mourning about their sins, and you're asking them, you are mourning about which sins?
I love what you did with that.
Some people are being sacrificed because of those who are greed and you know, don't know how to let go of their powers and their selfish you know, pursuits and so forth. Excuse me, we have a huge storm and I just heard something dropping in our garage, so I'll be right back.
Okay. Yes, you're in the big hurricane zone right now. I was me of the last name is Park, and I'm forgetting his first name. He's a Korean theologian. Andrew Song Park. Right. The sinned against, and we have to think about the sin, but also the sinned against.
Yes. And those that are sinned against are made to feel more sinful, rather than, you know, they are made to feel really, really sinful, but they are not. You know, they are not. They are denied opportunity. Here, some hospitals are very full. And if you turn up and you don't have an insurance, you die at the door, and somebody else comes with an insurance and they come in. They say there's no bed for those that have no insurance, and there's a bed for those that have insurances. And the ones who have no insurances are the ones that we are making to feel so guilty, so sinful, even within COVID. So you say lockdown, but they can't eat. But those of us who have, we can put things in the fridges and eat, but we are telling them not to move around. So it's really a very strange way of turning away, of making others feel more sinful than you. And in terms of, as you say in the New Testament, what is sinful is the greed, is the lying, is the stealing, is the cheating of what has happened in society. And COVID-19 has brought out all that to show that for a long time, the poor bear the brunt of this pandemic, of like COVID-19.
Well, I've been reading Ibrahim Kendi's book on how to be an anti-racist, and one of the things he points out about racism is the way that it puts the blame and the responsibility on the people who are the victims of oppression. And I think it's the same old story with, I'm happy some of you talked about domestic violence, because a lot of times we end up blaming the victim in that situation too. It's like all forms of oppression try to put the blame on the people who are oppressed.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring the small groups back now. It's been 15 minutes, I believe. So if you'll just hold on here for a moment, they'll start popping back. They're going to get a 60-second warning. Let me do that. Okay.
Well, because of the storm, I just want to warn you that, my internet might just, not.
Yeah.
Yeah, we understand.
That just means it's the nature.
Right.
Yep.
Well, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it will be okay, but just in case.
Just in case. Yeah.
You have a raging storm.
Yes.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you for reference to Katangole. That is a book I reviewed. It's a wonderful book, Katangole's book.
Wonderful,
On
wonderful.
lament
And hope.
Yes, it's one of the most powerful books I've read.
Can one of you put that in the chat to everyone, the reference to that book?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, people are starting to pop back now, but I don't know why they're not all coming.
They are raged.
Oh, 3 seconds. Okay. There we go. Here we go. Whoop.
COVID. אני אעשה עוד שנייה, יש לי פשוט פגישה פה.
I'm going to unmute everyone again. It's not working to unmute.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome back.
Yes.
If you're not unmuted, I tried to unmute everyone automatically, but you can unmute yourself if you want to talk. I'm going to turn it back over to Emmanuel.
So any questions, any comments, any reflections, any responses are welcome at this point. We are a small enough group, so if you want to speak, just wave your hand or raise your hand if you can use the facility, or else, of course, you can type it in the chat and we will take it up from there. So what are the reflections? What are the comments that emerged in your group, or maybe that you just want to raise? So I'm reading from a person who is saying, our group discussed what is the Christian perspective of offering a space for lamentation for people to embrace our loss and to say goodbye to Egypt, to keep going forward in this wilderness of COVID-19, attending our fear and anger, to embrace deeper transformation from this ongoing experience. Fascinating concerning lamentation, as well as saying goodbye and moving forward. I wonder if any of the panelists would like to comment on that. Yes, will the person who I think Kia Okada?
Yes.
Would you like to articulate your it's I think it's a comment and an implied question. Would you like to?
Yes. So
Yeah, please do.
So people's reactions are often really reaction of fear, that it's a very frightening experience to really realize how much we have lost and we are losing. And then anger comes up in reaction to that fear, and it's making people, it's difficult for them to really embrace and accept what's happening. So in a way, what's happening is our experience, but because of this fear, we are not owning and embracing the fear. And then trying to go back to Egypt again, Miss Marisol offering the metaphor, biblical metaphor, that a lot of people still want to go back to Egypt. So using what the presenters kindly offered, it's important, our role, to offer a space for lamentation, for the people to process, and then have space to really attend, so that we are actually always going forward. So the language, restoration and recovery, I also hear the word disillusionment. Yeah, that's something new element. So instead of recovery or restoration, it's more like we are being transformed. So going forward, until the day we may experience a new joy, we don't know when, but we have to own this experience of transformation. And I wonder how Christian perspective works for this transformative process.
Right, thank you very much. Esther, would you like to respond to that in terms of the Christian perspectives on transformation? Or Daniel? I think certainly we're...
Who's Esther now? I think we lost Esther.
Yeah, Angella, as you can see, Angella, in the most probably, as she's warned us, in the light of the storms.
There's a hurricane going up the coast, and it's hit the New York area heavily.
Yeah.
So
Daniel, do you have comments?
Speaking of lack of control, or lack of, we call it lack of power, interestingly enough, when the electricity goes. I heard the comment, more as a comment than as a question, and a very pertinent one. The praying in the three traditions that have been represented so far, but in our Christian tradition, certainly is such a key. The thing that we are learning more to do in Latin American circles is helping people to write their own prayers, in addition to reciting and praying, for example, with the Psalms, which is again essential, and I was mentioned, because there is this psychological effect, I would say, of becoming authors of their own lament in a way that is sort of crystallized in paper and heard, and they can go back to it. That is something that one can simply teach and encourage, again, from afar. This is one of the places. I mentioned in passing, because of time, the opportunities, at least especially in Latin American circle, where the funerals can be a very privileged spaces, really, for lament, and there is an after the funerals, the follow-up, shall we say, the continuity in the grieving process that pastors and others that in more so-called normal times we don't engage in, but nowadays that's much more called for. So those are two of the things that I would immediately say. I couldn't agree more that the space for lament, and sometimes I don't like, and I try not to use the expression, we give permission people to lament. I don't think we should try to give permission. We encourage lament, we make space for people lament, we welcome their lament, and we are witness to their lament. I prefer that kind of language. So I would kindly suggest to our colleagues not to use that. One hear or reads that word often in writings. And anyway, who are we to give people permission to lament? Imagine. But giving space, as you started, but that's a different thing. And it will happen, and we will all be blessed somehow, even as suffering, as a way of processing the pain as such, in a way that may be constructive and transformational.
I think Kay and Marisol have also opened up a very fruitful area of Christian theology around the idea of transformation, because, I mean, we've seen this just on a practical level at seminaries where, you know, now we're trying to move from seat of the pants, do the best you can online teaching that was instantly imposed on us in March, to actually beginning to try to do intentional good pedagogy for online teaching and resourcing our faculty to do that. And I think it's kind of the same with our whole life, that we have to stop worrying about getting back to normal. It's not going to go back to the same normal that it was before, but that there is also a potential for a creative disruption here. And I think the eruption of Black Lives Matter has been one manifestation of that. Angela had a good tie into that with the constructive aspect of narcissistic rage, you know, that you have righteous indignation and outrage against the way things have been, that there's a lot about the way things were and getting back to normal that we don't want. And so can we draw on our Christian resources theologically to think about transformation rather than going back?
Yeah.
I loved the image of leaving the flesh pots of Egypt. You know, and we're going through a wilderness, but the promised land isn't going back.
Right.
Also,
and God says, behold, I am doing a new thing. All right, I'll shut up now.
also one more Christian element came to our group discussion was the understanding of like a kingdom or heaven. Some people might say, Christians, we believe God is in control. It will be okay. It will be okay. But then that doesn't mean for our theology that the kingdom of God or heaven is something we are waiting for, or we just do nothing and wait for. No, 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 we have a job to do. And the kingdom is here and heaven is here. So that kind of a theological understanding of awareness that we have this God-given work to do to manifest the heavenly quality, and it's a divine calling for Christians, I think.
Esther, when we were, when the panelists were in our own small group, you were speaking about the ways in which people focus on their own sin in these times and even blaming the victim. Can you say a little bit more about that to the whole group? Because I think it's relevant to what Kay just said. You're muted.
You have to unmute.
I can't unmute you. You have to do it yourself. I'm not sure her Wi-Fi is connecting well.
Yes, I think she's having Wi-Fi connectivity issues. Yeah.
To rain, just got the rain from my sisters. I think it's something that has to be allowed for people to struggle with it and move on rather than being forced. In terms of sin, COVID-19 being a punishment from God because of the sins that people have committed. And the people who are given that theology are really the poor people that people keep saying because of your sin. So you have to repent. You have to repent. But people are not brought out to light about structural sins, about sins, as I was saying in the New Testament, sins of greed, sins of exploitation, sins of oppression. But they are made to be personal sins. And so the ones that struggle a lot with the challenges of COVID-19 are the ones that are supposed to be repenting even more. And I'm trying to say that's wrong theology. It's not the right theology for people to be made to be repenting on some of the issues that have been exposed within COVID-19. Like when people are violated in this private space, and they're being asked questions. So what did you do? You should have done this so that you could avoid being violated. So I was just saying that this notion of personalizing sin and not looking at it in a wider context, especially in the context of COVID-19 and in the context of the rich versus the poor, or the strong versus the weak in the society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We have time for a couple more responses, questions from our participants. One of the things that I found fascinating was the connection between lament, where we began, protest, and rage and joy. So it seemed as if lament and joy were kind of like in the same, we were talking about the rage response, creative rage. Lament is of the same kind of nature. But then we were also talking about joy and the spirituality of joy. So fascinating, drawing on some of these great, grand themes in our faith that actually inform how we live and how we engage structures of oppression.
One thing that, if I may also think came up today, what we might call the prophetic dimension of spiritual care, right. In pointing to the harm in all ways, and to the extent that we have a holistic anthropology and a holistic view of healing and so forth, and caregiving as such, we can also make a contribution, humbly said, in that way. Pam used the term creative disruption, and redemptive subversion is also part of our
right.
A creative disruption that involves redemptive, liberating, subversive kind of import that then issues in release and joy and celebration. And then we say, thanks be to God, even as we also thank each other, and especially those people that have been walking with us along the way in their suffering.
Well, I think I said this in a comment last week too, but certainly being at Union Seminary, where all of our students are so involved in protest and activism as a part of their sense of call. I mean, I think that the prophetic and the pastoral is a false dichotomy. I don't even know how you can really be one without the other. If you're prophetic without the pastoral, you're going to burn yourself out, because we were talking about this actually during the break, the panelist group, that if you don't have some way of expressing joy in the midst of it, then it's just all grim all the time. And you'll burn out. But if you don't have the prophetic with the pastoral, you're just putting Band-Aids on stuff. And you know the old cliche about why are the bodies coming down the river, and you're taking care of the bodies, but you need to go up the river to find out why the bodies are coming down. And so
Yes.
I don't think that they can really be separated in a healthy way.
Exactly.
And I think it's so important that we do not equate hope with escapism. Similarly, we do not equate joy with, a head in the sand kind of, happiness. These are much, much deeper. The hope that we are speaking about is the hope of protest. The joy that we are speaking about is the joy of the spirit, the deep sense that finds in the struggle something to give gratitude to the God who continues to bear the pain with us, the God who is a part of the pain. It's not that. And I think that's very, very important. And I was really grateful that all of our panelists had that depth in terms of unchallenged, easy equations, because there's a lot of that is happening, a lot of attempts to make easy equations with particular aspects of our faith. And I think it's very important for us to go deeper with these very things.
Yes, yes.
Often we suffer dichotomy, this or that.
Right.
And I think this is a holistic vision of our faith, embracing the whole spectrum of our experience. But it's wonderful to be affirmed. I think a new level and a new form of solidarity, I think that's a great source of joy, I think, and hope.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes. Well,
one thing that I think it was implicit in our conversation is also the importance of memory and testimony, because hope tends to be illicit to the extent that we have also an opportunity to recall being gifted from the past, as it were. And again, actually, this is one of the interesting things that one sees in the Psalms, that after, for example, Psalm 73, the feeling sort of stuck in the present and the rage, say, well, there's a question about opening to recalling the time in which there was blessing and at least contributing to eliciting that hope in the process.
I see Helmut's hand. I see your hand. Maybe you'd unmute and ask your question, and I think that will have to be our last question. But Helmut, if you can unmute and then please ask. Yes, sir.
When we are talking about hope, Paul always is connecting hope with Jesus Christ. We have hope in Jesus Christ, and maybe we must or we should more think about what does it mean. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Paul is a very good example of a person who is suffering, but is keeping the hope, not his hope, but God's hope through Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And I mean that gives hope depth and is very meaningful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for that.
Can I I think when you go to that, Pauline tradition too, it for me that invokes resurrection language, and I feel like resurrection isn't just about what happens to us personally at the end of our life when we die, but that out of all kinds of littler deaths and griefs that happen to us across our life, that it's the hope of renewal and resurrection, and that goes back to where we started this group discussion, which is that there will be something new that comes out of the other side of this pandemic. It's not going to be going back to how it was, even the flesh pots of Egypt that we might have liked, but there's going to be a transformation. Right. And perhaps part of the pastoral charge that we have is to help that transformation to be a positive one and a hopeful one, where also oppression is addressed along the way, because the pandemic has revealed places of death to us, not just physical death of disease, but places of death in our cultures that we now are more vividly aware of than ever. And so the hope of the resurrection is a powerful image for us, I think, to use for that understanding.
And the explicit Christological reference, therefore, is so relevant and so important, that it is in Christ, it is in Jesus Christ that we find this resurrection, this hope, this joy. So I think that's really, really interesting, and the contribution that can be made.
And nothing can separate us from the love of God. There's right. Also a Pauline discussion in Jesus, right. In Romans, even death or pandemic, etc. Yeah. So love is what is there. We cannot resort any other magical power right. Or something, but love is that saved us, and we are also agents of that love.
Well, I want to thank you all very sincerely. We are out of time now, but thank you very sincerely. Thanks to our panelists, and thank you for our participation. And please be sure to be here with us again next week, when we will have a team of Buddhist practitioners who will be our panelists. Thank you.
I'm going to ask the IASC board members to stay on just for one moment to debrief. Everyone else, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you so much.
Emmanuel. Thank you, everybody. Yes.
You know what I just discovered that I didn't know before is I can put people back in the waiting room.
Ah.
Oh.
So that's what I